and welcome to Season 1 of the new series Teaching Matters on the PsychSessions Network. This series is co-hosted by Dr. Rob McEntarffer, who serves as an assessment specialist for the Lincoln Public School System in Lincoln, Nebraska, and me, Eric Landrum, your humble podcast servant from Boise State University and co-founder of PsychSessions. Rob and I, we had a blast recording these chats, 12 episodes in all in Season 1, including this brief introductory episode. Episodes 2 through 12 range in length from 16 minutes to 35 minutes each. So they are meant to be bite-sized, suitable for binge listening if you wish. Oh, we ramble quite a bit, and at times you might laugh with us or laugh at us. Honestly, we don't care which. Please know that the viewpoints expressed here represent Rob and Eric's own opinions respectively, and not the opinions of their individual employers. As we discuss teaching matters, we hope these conversations will be provocative and thought-provoking. If you have ideas for future episode topics or want to comment, most podcast outlets allow for comments, or you can email us at psychsessionspodcast@gmail.com. Now, I will put that email address in the liner notes for each episode, show notes, but here it is again, all one word, psychsessionspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy Season 1 of Teaching Matters. So, Rob, I'm going to try to start us on a slightly different but related topic. You
Great.
Good with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Welcome back for another episode of Teaching Matters. I'm here with Rob McEntarffer, and I'm going to catch him off guard by asking him this question. Rob, what do you think that high school graduates know and are able to do when they graduate? Take your time.
Eric, you think you catch me off guard, but it's impossible. I anticipate your every question.
I'm not surprised by that, my friend.
In our world, those are called graduation requirements, and like everything else, they're going to differ a lot across contexts. But there's probably a lot of remarkable similarity across high schools across the country for graduation requirements, and it's probably a lot of what we were all used to if we went to colleges, if we went to high school in the United States. It's probably credit hours, which correspond with
seat time,
with a grade high enough to get credit. So the metaphor is getting credit for taking something, and that doesn't necessarily translate into a set of described skills or knowledge. There's a district standards that you can look at so you can get some sense of what was covered, but I think we have a ways to go in defining what skills students graduate with. And this is related to, I know you were involved and I was involved tangentially, and a lot of our friends were really involved in the IPI and really trying to define what the skills are in introductory psychology. I'm interested in using that same kind of logic in K-12 to really get at skills. Last thing, it's going to differ radically across curriculum areas. My colleagues in math and English language arts, and maybe art, maybe physical education, could talk about skills in a much more precise way than we can in social studies, and science would be somewhere in the middle.
My college level colleagues, and I'm talking broadly now, not just Boise State, they love to cast aspersions and distribute blame. They're really good at this, especially in their downtime. So we like to blame, and I'm a bit tongue-in-cheek here. So for the audience members who can't see us, we like to cast aspersions and distribute blame. So we like to blame high school teachers for the students that they send us. I can't even do it with a straight face. What do you think about that? I'm sure you hear this.
Yeah.
I'm sure you hear this from parents, from legislators. I'm saying this to be provocative and have a conversation. I don't believe it myself. Obviously, there's incredible variation in school districts, in classrooms, in expectations, in funding models of high schools within a state, within a county, within a school district, across the nation. What can we realistically expect before a student exits a high school?
My first thought may not be super useful, but it's about the blame game, and that tradition exists in K-12 too. I'm not sure if middle school or junior high school teachers blame elementary teachers, because elementary teachers are just way too nice. High school teachers absolutely blame middle school teachers. And teachers of junior and senior level classes in high school blame teachers of ninth and 10th grade classes in high school. So that tradition is alive and well.
I have
Connecting
to tell you, that makes me feel a little bit better.
but my first thought is that I think that relates to transfer. And what we know about transfer in the literature is far transfer is notoriously hard. So teaching something in one context with the expectation that someone will use that knowledge or skills in another context, we know that's really difficult and probably impossible, or at least very unlikely, unless that unless students have been supported in transferring that knowledge or skill to a different context. So a student might learn to write a 5-paragraph essay perfectly well in high school. They show up at Boise and they can't do it to your writing task in an intro class. Is that a lack of skill, or is that a lack of transfer, or is that the same thing?
Or is it that there was 3 months in between their May graduation and their August matriculation? Maybe that's 4 or 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lack of practice, and there's, what is that, degradation or extinction. And without repeated trials,
Right.
that skill deteriorates. And it's not anyone's fault.
Mm-hmm.
And blame, although fun to play, clearly, uh, doesn't get us anywhere. And maybe I think, well, that absolves me, and I feel better about distributing C and D grades because these students can't do blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets us into this, I don't know, this vortex of negativity that doesn't do anybody any good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love it when I hear college teachers talk about, I might call it a gap analysis. So the students that I have right now in front of me, instead of what can't they do, trying to figure out, okay, here's what they're coming in with and here's what they need to learn. So if I assign a longer essay where students have to compare two theories using three pieces of evidence, and the students fall apart on that, oh, I expected you could do that. Huh. What caused you to fall apart on that? Was it, I haven't told you what I mean by evidence yet? Is it, I'm using the word analyze differently than you used the word analyze? Is it, and I'll air some dirty laundry here, is it that you were when you were taught to write an essay, you were taught an extremely formulaic process, and that process doesn't fit this new example? I think that's very possible.
I think it's also possible that I haven't scaffolded it. They could have come out of high school as excellent creative writers or writers of literature and prose. But we both know that scientific writing and psychology is a different beast.
Yeah.
It's a different tone, it's a different voice. You put away the flowery poetic prose that you might have conquered in English 1, 2, 3, and 4, or honors English, or AP English, or AP literature. And it's a different thing altogether. In fact, students who take our English 101 at Boise State learn MLA format, Modern Language Association, and they come into psychology and we say, you now need to unlearn that
Yep.
because we're not going to teach MLA, we're going to teach APA. And a lot of that's not, I know it, a lot of it's not on high school at all. It's on college, it's on us.
Yeah, and that's part of transfer too. So things like citation style, but then it even goes deeper than that. So I think I'm a pretty decent writer, but if I was suddenly thrust into a history class and I was asked to write a history class, and they might use words that I think I know, analyze, use evidence, and evaluate. But I bet my essay'd probably be okay. But I bet a history teacher thinks differently about analyze, evidence, and evaluate. And I'm just not hip to their lingo yet. I don't know what they mean by those words. So in some ways, it, and it goes back to what you said before. We haven't defined skills and what those skills are. And is there a discrete set of skills that we should expect to transfers across different contexts? Or does every department just have to pull up their stockings and teach kids how to write in their field?
Two things I want to add, Rob. So first off, that history professor or that history teacher, they're going to think differently about that, even depending on where they are in their own career.
Yeah.
That history professor in their third year post-terminal degree is thinking differently about history and writing differently than that history instructor 25 years post-terminal degree. So they're thinking differently and they're grading differently. I want to come back to something else that you said that's really thought-provoking about the gap.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just came out in the past 2 weeks, and they've done it historically. The American Association for Colleges and Universities, AAC&U, hires Heart Research Associates in Washington, D.C., and they do a national survey of CEOs and HR managers. And they've done it at least twice now. They did it in 2018, and they just published it a couple of weeks ago in 2021 about the skills and abilities that CEOs and HR managers, what they value in collegiate new hires across all disciplines, not just psychology, what they value and what they believe their current new hires' strengths are. So there's literally a gap analysis, and the graphics are startling because they show this sometimes 40% gap, because it's measured on the same scale, of critical thinking skills. 78% of those CEOs on an 8, 9, or 10 on an 11-point scale say it's important or vitally important, but only 38% have 8, 9, or 10 level of skills in their new hires. So there's this gap. So college professors don't have the luxury of complaining about, oh, who did we get sent into our classrooms? Because employers are across all parts of the US, across all disciplines, across all colleges, including Harvard and everywhere else, and Boise State, are complaining through these national reports about the gaps in what's important. And they've been telling us this for years, and what they're getting, which is not good enough.
Yeah, and that makes me wonder about transfer and context too. So the CEOs who respond to those surveys, are they, and this sounds like I'm quibbling with the data, but I think it might actually help interpret the data. When you ask people about something called critical thinking, are different CEOs in different industries thinking about critical thinking in even the same remote way? If someone who's in charge of a social work nonprofit and someone who's in charge of a hedge fund, do they even mean the same thing by critical thinking, communication, collaboration? So that's what I always wonder when I try to interpret those data.
So it's a great question. And at least the 2018 one, I haven't dug that far into the 2021. There were 15 skills and abilities summarized, and I have not personally seen the version that gets sent out for them to fill out. So I think you're asking a really good question. But I will tell you, in some ways, I don't think it matters because it's the CEOs and human resource managers who are doing the hiring.
Yeah.
And they're the ones telling us there are gaps
Yeah.
in here's what's important, and we ain't getting it from the current workforce we're hiring from. So you're right. They may think of critical thinking and creative problem solving differently than we define it. But some of the things like oral and written communication, it's probably pretty close to a one-to-one correspondence. But in some ways, those who have the golden rule is those who have the gold make the rules. And if there's a gap, I believe it. And plus, if you do a basic Google Scholar search on skills gap, you'll find 10 to 20 corporate and technical reports on this as a trend in the last 5 to 7 years.
I should dig some more because I think the follow-up research that I would love to see is And here are some examples. I'm a CEO, I identify the gap. This new hire or this person I was potentially going to hire couldn't do this. And the seeing the task and the couldn't do this might be what we need in K-12 and college so that we know what that gap is.
And you might get a kick out of this, and I know you have no spare time, but on my YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
probably about 8 years ago now, I went around Boise and I interviewed a couple of CEOs, and there's one in particular, Bob Loken, and he describes himself as a serial entrepreneur. He starts a company, he gets it up and running successful, sells it off, and goes and starts another one. And I interviewed him with the help of an undergraduate and asked him a bunch of questions, and I chopped those up into little videos. And they're all up on YouTube. They're free. There's no commercials. There's no nothing.
I'm going to look.
And I'm sorry?
I'm going to look.
Oh, okay. And I asked him questions about what does he want in the people that he hires? What does he wish that was different? What does he wish professors would do differently in the people that he hires? And I got answers like, I don't need new employees to be able to write 10-page term papers. I need them to be able to write 2 paragraphs in an email where the first paragraph summarizes everything I need to know. And the second paragraph is a follow-up summary of next steps.
That's a fantastic example. Yeah.
So I don't need that longer ability in terms of it was writing specific. It was about the ability to hold a conversation and make eye contact rather than someone being glued to the phone and looking down and doing this thing with their thumbs. And I was in his office and my student was behind me, filming over my shoulder. And we were just having it was a Q&A, and he was awesome. And he was he was really well versed because he knew about employment trends in other countries and what other educators were doing elsewhere. And he could make recommendations. He's active and involved in the educational community in Treasure Valley here in Idaho. Cool. And I think some of that advice still holds even 8 years later.
I bet so. And that kind of specific, I need employees who can do this task, sounds maybe too specific, but I think that's much more useful than I need employees who are better at critical thinking, because critical thinking means so many different things.
Rob, I actually, after that experience, started to redesign some of my upper division classes. So in a capstone class, I have students do a mini podcast where they write a script and they record it. Awesome. I have students do an infographic where they take a complex topic and they translate it for the public in an image, and they print the image, or I print the image for them, because that skill of being able to translate a complex topic but make it understandable to the public, not with APA style references, but with endnotes.
Yeah.
So you still have to give credit where credit is due. They worked in that capstone class, they work in teams. So they have a teamwork project where they actually work as a consulting team, and they worked as a consultant on in the department for a faculty member who had a project for them.
Cool.
And they all have those consulting skills, and I have to actually convince them, you have marketable skills now, even before you graduate.
That's fantastic. If we want to, just going back to transfer, if we want to teach for transfer, which I think almost every teacher, no matter what level, says they want to do, we need to know more information about what the context students are expected to be transferring into, which means we need to know below and above, but especially above. So maybe we're getting back to K-12 and college. Maybe in K-12, we need to hear more from you all about what students are expected to do in your classes so that we can teach for transfer, and you need to teach for transfer to employment.
You've just said it so eloquently and succinctly. At the college level, every instructor knows what to do and how to teach for the students who want to go to graduate school in psychology.
Yeah.
Because every instructor pretty much went to graduate school in psychology in a department of psychology, pretty much. And we know from the national data, only 14% of students go on to graduate school in psychology. 56% go into the workforce. And by the way, most psychology instructors in departments of psychology, many of them never worked outside of academia.
Yeah.
They went straight from graduate school into their first assistant professor or lecturer job. So one of the reasons I started going into the community and interviewing employers of our graduates is that I needed to know what they do. And I needed to know what they did beyond our alumni surveys that gave us a job description of a PSR. Okay, psychosocial rehabilitation specialist. I can read about that and I can talk to an alum, or I can talk to the hospital that hires them and they can tell me about it. And I can get a richer 360 kind of understanding of it. And I can then start to redesign my upper division classes so students can start to practice the skills. Here it is, the transfer. Students can start to practice the skills that can help them transfer to what's next.
Right.
Because if they're practicing for the workplace, guess what? They're practicing for graduate school also.
Yeah.
Because the graduate school is also what comes after that, the workplace.
Yeah. I wonder if we want to pick up on this theme, this might be a really good theme for the future. And I remember Jane Hallinan describing once her early career at Alverno College. And Alverno had a super unique assessment, evaluation, accountability, grading system that I think explicitly described skills and prerequisites. So I wonder if that might be a useful conversation.
Absolutely. And the thing about Alverno to this day, I believe they don't post grades.
Yeah.
They don't post numerical grades or alphabetical grades with a numerical equivalent. They write narratives. And how Jane's described it, they are taught and trained to have those narratives be written with respect to knowledge and skills.
Mm-hmm.
And what a gift to give that student a transcript with, let's see, what would it be? About 40 courses with 40 narratives about what that student learned and the skills and abilities they came away with after those experiences, and what an employer could read about what that student has learned over 4 or 5 years, as opposed to 3.75.
Yep. And if we do talk with Jane, I'll also want to hear what a gift for employers, what a gift for students. It could be a gift for teachers. So what if you got to teach an intro or a research methods class and has 30 students, instead of basically knowing nothing about those students, which is the current situation, that they were able to stay in college long enough to take your class is all. If you had some narratives, and it would be a lot of reading, but it might be incredibly illuminating for you to know what skills students are coming in with. That's what you need for a gap analysis.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I'm smiling a little bit because when I first got to Boise State in 1992, I started teaching intro psych.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 2 sections of intro psych, and they were 320 students each.
Woof. Yeah.
So I have a hard time imagining the 640 narratives I would have written as an assistant professor. And Alverno had the advantage of a small private liberal arts.
All this falls apart at scale, and that's true for K-12 too. We have to have a system that works at scale. Our district is 40,000 students. So no matter what we want to do, we have to evaluate and report for that scale of students, and sacrifices are made.
Yeah, I've toyed with my faculty here at Boise State because I actually think that, and I'm talking beyond me now, my colleagues in my Department of Psychological Science, many of them have been, I believe, very innovative in things that they have done at scale. Currently, we have 768 psych majors in the spring 2021 semester and about I'm going to say 330 psych minors. And we teach courses that serve the rest of the university, not only a gen ed course in Psych 101, but we have courses like abnormal psych, statistical methods that serve many other majors in many ways. And I think many of my colleagues have been innovative, and I've tried to dangle in front of them without success. What if we were to start the Center for the Teaching of Large Classes?
Oh, yeah. Cool.
because I do think there is an art to it.
Yeah.
And obviously there are advantages in terms of serving students, and you can leverage certain techniques and technologies to become better at teaching large classes. And there are things that you can do in large classes that you cannot do in small classes.
Yep.
There are actually advantages. I can't get anybody to bite on it because, everyone's overworked and likely underpaid, to be fair. And there are a couple of analogous institutes around the country, but no one who does it exactly. And there's a book or two, but they're a little bit out of date. So,
I,
but I like the idea.
I think that'd be a cool conversation.
Yeah, large classes, and they're not going away. And I'll just tell one aside. Like somewhere in the mid 90s, I made the case to someone. We were teaching 4 sections of 30, a stat class, a 200 level stat class for majors. And I made the case then, let me teach one section of 120, and that will free up 3 other people to teach other things that the department needs. I'll teach 120 in my stat class. No big deal. And we did that. And once you do that, it's a slippery slope that you can never go back. You can never go back a couple semesters later and tell the dean, we need 4 instructors to teach stat. Wait, you just did it with one. And the issue becomes when you put someone in who does it and gets decent teaching evaluations like my colleagues do, you can't go back to smaller class sizes. So when people make that decision at places, realize it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, victim of your own success. You.
Yes, I love that phrase, Rob.
Yeah.
I love that phrase. Victims of our own success.
If you play with the scale idea, it's a different beast, but there might be some concepts that are similar enough that it could work. I got to see a talk by Barbara Oakley. Do you know that name?
Sounds vaguely familiar, but I really can't place it, to be honest.
Teaches in Rochester, Michigan at Oakland University. But one of the things she's famous for is she's got a Coursera course, which is a MOOC. So it's
right?
An asynchronous video-based, and it's famously / notoriously one of the biggest and most popular ones out there in the world. And it actually is called How We Learn, I think. I was just looked it up. Yeah, Learning How to Learn. So it's a science of learning, cognitive sci thing, but I think tens of thousands of people take that at one time. And it's different because it's asynchronous. So it's a different methodology. But parts of her talk that I thought were fascinating was she was thinking about issues that I would never think about in a million years in my classroom.
The MOOC in some ways makes a lot of sense to me. If you can figure it out for 300, why can't you figure it out for 3,000? And maybe we'll close on this because this is probably controversial and a fire starter. Why not? Who do we like around the country? Who's one of our best buddies? I don't want to use me as an example. Who do we like?
We like a lot of people. Let's say Elizabeth Hammer.
No, I don't want to throw her under the bus. Give me an intro psych instructor.
It's got to be someone to throw under the bus. You didn't tell me that.
A little bit, just a tiny bit.
I don't know that you know her. Somebody from UNL, last name's Kramer. She teaches intro psych.
Oh, Carolyn.
Yeah, Carolyn.
All right, Carolyn Kramer. I hate throwing her under the bus, but she's actually doing some awesome research, just published
Very
recently.
cool research, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Carolyn Brown Kramer, I believe.
Yeah.
All right, and so why not have Carolyn take her Psych 101 course that she's teaching at UNL for 300, 400 students a semester, and put it online as a MOOC.
Mm-hmm.
Asynchronous, just like you just described. And for every 300 students, UNL gets her a TA, just with grading, right?
Yeah.
Put it online, let 30,000 enroll, and take Psych 101 from Carolyn, and let them transfer it back to their home institution. Why wouldn't Boise State take that? She's a certified instructor at UNL. She's awesome. She's teaching a bona fide course at her institution. Why wouldn't Boise State take that credit? Oh, we're going to charge a transfer fee, $30, whatever. She can charge a fee. UNL can charge a fee, a matriculation fee, $60.
Mm-hmm.
30,000 students take her 101, $60 a pop. And not all of them want it for a class. It's an open course,
Yeah.
but maybe 1,000 of them want it for $60. And they transfer it back to their home institution. And each institution gets $30. Boise State has done nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe 50 students take it and transfer it back a semester. Didn't take any of our bandwidth, didn't take any of our courses, didn't take any of our seats, didn't take any of our parking spots on campus. They got a quality course from a quality instructor. Carolyn got another student in her MOOC. UNL charged a fee. They recovered something that they can help pay that TA. I don't understand why that model can't work and isn't being used.
I bet it could work. I wonder if some of the questions people might have are, what are learning experiences? And you and I talked about this in a previous conversation in relation to the pandemic. What are learning experiences you can have in person versus remotely? And the related question is, what are learning experiences that you can have synchronously versus asynchronously? So I think that might be a consideration for some places. And it goes back to what skills and knowledge can you teach in a asynchronous MOOC that maybe you can or can't even in a large scale in-person class. And you would know that better than I could.
I'm not so sure I would know it better, but in a well-designed MOOC with feedback and teaching assistants providing support, that could be better than a poorly designed synchronous class given by a Boise State faculty member by me, like
Fascinating.
me.
That's a fascinating topic.
What if it was high quality? And what if she curated these videos from all over the world by these world-class psychologists? And it was awesome, and it was tight, and it was tested. And she had data to support because she's a researcher.
Yeah.
She's a Psych 101 researcher published in the literature. And her institution makes money, and my institution makes money for doing nothing.
Yeah. And a lot of our conversation today has been about alignment. Institutions would want to talk about, do we have expectations in our college and in our course sequence for alignment between what happens in intro psych versus what happens in later courses? If that answer is yes, maybe the MOOC doesn't help. If the answer is no, though, maybe the MOOC is better.
We transfer in stuff from other institutions all the time.
Yeah.
As a 4-year institution, and all we get is the syllabus, and we know they were enrolled there.
Yeah.
The only difference I want to make is that I don't want to make a Boise State student have to become a UNL student.
Right.
And to enroll for that fee.
Yeah.
And then, because if they did that, they could actually transfer it back to Boise State for free, which might be the way to go. But why not just have a transfer per course fee rather than institution? And think of the cool courses people could design around the country where if it were a MOOC, I could send people Regan Gurung and Kathy Becker-Bleese and one other faculty member, I'm not going to know her name, last summer, 2020, developed a pandemic-related course at Oregon State on the fly about surviving the pandemic for psych majors, and that was a MOOC.
Cool.
And it was open. And so a Boise State student could have, in theory, completed it, but they wouldn't have gotten credit for it. But their Oregon State undergrads did get credit for it if they signed up for it, enrolled, and all that. Cool. Why can't my Boise State students take the course, do the work, and get credit? How come that model can't work?
Yeah, and a lot of it's been about clarifying what skills and knowledge are the expectations of certain courses and proving that you accomplish that, and given that, what credit should be accrued.
And by the way, when I approve, as a department chair, when I approve these academic adjustments, I see a syllabus and I see a transcript. I might see a grade, And I don't document that the work was done.
Yep.
I trust these electronic documents. Why wouldn't I trust the electronic documents from a MOOC and another institution and another instructor? Anyway.
By the way, I'm sure we have to wrap up soon, but people are not going to believe that we made it through this entire conversation without talking advanced placement and advanced placement credit transfer.
Oops. Put that one in the parking lot, and we'll come back to that perhaps next time.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks. This was great.